Hi, I'm Kim MacGillavry. I am Strategy Director at UPS Europe. UPS being probably the largest parcel logistics company in the world and a sizable business in Europe. And I look after the strategy development team. Companies really need to make fundamental changes to their global supply chains, right? And there's two critical conditions for supply chains to be successful. On the one hand, you need to have efficiency, and on the other hand, you need resilience, right? And to be very efficient comes often at the expense of resilience, and to be more resilient often comes at the expense of efficiency. And I think the big lesson from the corona crisis is that it's exposed weaknesses in the balance between these two. And that we need to kind of rethink that. I mean, if we look at efficiencies, companies generally focused on really the innovation of their products and their organization and so on. But logistics is not really considered part of the product anymore, right? It's considered a necessary cost. And so what companies tend to do when it gets to supply chains is really minimize cost. So your working capital is as small as it needs to be, right? And you really would prefer to have big warehouses that you can afford to automate and maximize your throughput, right? So the cost per piece goes down. And consolidate as much as possible the transportation in and out of all of those places, right? Now, on the other hand, when you look at resilience, right, doing this efficiency drive puts supply chains in a very precarious situation, and often companies are not very aware of the risks that they're exposed to. And the problem is that when those risks materialize, now the price is high, and it's maybe higher than the cost you've saved. Most companies have a pretty good relationship with their tier one suppliers, but often the risks originate far deeper down in the supply chain. If you look at the lockdowns, maybe the tier one supplier was not in any restricted area, but if their suppliers were in restricted areas, suddenly the whole thing grinds to a halt. So that's why, during the crisis, you'll see that companies that have been reliant on a single supplier or a single warehouse, they've come into some real trouble, right? So companies need to manage, the efficiency as well as the resilience, and assess both the cost as well as the risk associated to the supply chains now. And the key to achieving that new normal is by integrating all of these players better, right? So it's really about data and getting the right data in time, and that will create new possibilities to achieve a much better level of efficiency, while also building in a lot more resilience into our supply chains. Consumers, they want to be served what they want, when they want, and how they want. And really, businesses really only have the option to adapt to all these rapid changes in demand. With e-commerce, of course, this irreversible growth of e-commerce, response times are just going to get shorter and shorter, and everything's just going to get more and more challenging. So companies, they optimize their own operations to avoid producing the wrong things in the wrong quantity and putting them in the wrong place. And nowadays they can use advanced analytics tools. And so they have a much better understanding of demand and work that way upstream to purchase and production orders, right? So, and as more and more of the business is being digitized and automated, all of these transactions, become, available for models to start, analyzing and predicting certain outcomes. Now, the problem again here is that applying these techniques to certain parts of the business, falls short of optimizing, the whole business. So without connecting this intelligence with the ecosystem of suppliers, including logistics service providers, we won't succeed at materially optimizing the business and unlock really the true potential of efficiency. To make the global economy future-proof, we need to improve both, supply chain efficiency as well as supply chain resilience. And the availability and quality of data will actually determine the agility of companies to deal with changes. And I'm talking here about both the internal data to make the right business decisions quicker than competitors, as well as the end-to-end supply chain visibility and control to respond to those changes quickly, right? You need to look at both those aspects. And a prerequisite for that is data integration, right? So along this whole supply chain and deep into the operating systems of companies, you need to get the data connected. And that's, of course, where technology companies will play a critical role in the future. I mean, all the parties along the supply chain need to share more data in order to enable better business planning and decision making. And that's not happening by itself, right? There's no mechanism for that to happen naturally because all parties protect their data. And mainly for competitive reasons. Wholesalers and retailers, well, they don't want to let others know what they're buying and planning to sell, when the promos are on for which items. And logistics companies, well, they don't want their competitors to take away their business, right? And suppliers, well, they don't want their customers to trade them off for others. So there's no natural, tendency to share data. There are some attempts to share data, and that they deliver some sort of efficiency, but it's really limited to digital marketplaces, I would call them, where supply and demand are traded on a transactional basis. But this falls way short of tapping into the real potential efficiencies that we can materialize if all parties along the supply chain share data with each other. So, technology companies could play a really important role in unlocking that potential.